The photograph on my mantel stops me cold every morning, its silver frame glinting like a beacon I can't ignore. Me at 35, cradling 5-year-old James as he leans forward, cheeks puffed, blowing out candles on a rocket-shaped cake I'd spent all night crafting. His eyes, bright as the August sun, mirror mine, crinkled with joy, unscarred by the weight of years. 30 years later, I can still feel the warmth of his small body against mine, the sticky frosting on his fingers as he grabbed my hand. For 3 decades, I never missed a single one of his birthdays. Until Andrea, his wife, called to say I wasn't welcome at his 40th, her voice smooth as polished stone, explaining the guest list was curated for their lake house celebration. A celebration I'd unknowingly helped make possible, though she'd never know that. Not yet. Pine Ridge, Washington, where I raised James, clings to the edge of Puget Sound like a secret whispered between cedar forests and salt air. The town smells of damp earth and diesel from the logging trucks that rumble through, their engines a low hum against the quiet of our lives. My childhood home, a sagging clapboard cottage on Maple Street, sat 2 blocks from the cannery where my father worked until his heart gave out when I was 12. My mother followed him 3 years later, cancer stealing her breath before I could finish high school. By 17, I was alone, scraping by on waitressing tips and a stubborn refusal to let grief define me. That's the first trauma I carried, the kind that hollows you out, leaving echoes of absence where love once lived. I was 24 when I met Richard, a commercial pilot with a laugh that could thaw winter. He'd grown up in England, his accent softened by years stateside, and he loved Pine Ridge for its unpretentious grit. We married in a courthouse, my thrift store dress brushing the floor as we vowed forever. James came 2 years later, a squalling bundle with his father's hazel eyes. We dreamed of a life beyond our means, a college fund for James, a small plane for Richard's weekend hobby. But dreams are fragile things. When James was 2, Richard's single-engine Cessna went down in a storm over the Cascades. No survivors. One day, we were planning our son's future, the next, I was planning a funeral, explaining to a toddler why Daddy wasn't coming home from the sky. The grief was a physical thing, a stone lodged in my chest. But James needed me, so I buried it deep, where it couldn't touch him. Pine Ridge became both refuge and battleground. Our 2-bedroom bungalow, bought with Richard's life insurance, sat in a district with strong public schools, a calculated choice. The mortgage ate half my salary, but I'd seen what education could do. My father, a factory worker with an 8th-grade education, had drilled that into me. Knowledge opens doors that stay open, he'd say, his calloused hands flipping through my library books. I wanted James to walk through every door I'd been denied. Teaching credentials got me a job at Lakeside Elementary, thanks to Dr. Patricia Winters, my mentor and the school's principal. "Eleanor, you have a gift with struggling readers," she'd said, her gray eyes kind but firm. "We'll make this work around James's schedule." That job was my lifeline, steady pay, benefits, hours that let me be home when James needed me. But balance was a myth. I'd rise at 5 a.m., brew coffee strong enough to cut through exhaustion, teach until 3 p.m., then race to pick up James from daycare. Evenings were homework, dinner, bedtime stories, and grading papers until midnight. When tears came, they fell in the shower, where James couldn't hear. My parents were gone, Richard's family distant in England. It was just us, me stretching every dollar, every moment, to keep us whole. James was my anchor, his curiosity a light in the dark. At 4, he'd stack blocks into towers, explaining their structural integrity with a seriousness that made me laugh. By 7, he was devouring math workbooks, his pencil flying across pages. Pine Ridge's library became our second home, its musty stacks offering science books and free summer programs. I saw his potential, sharp as a blade, and vowed to sharpen it. Dating, remarriage, those were luxuries I couldn't afford. My heart belonged to James, to the future I was building for him, brick by painstaking brick. The town shaped us both. Winter brought rain that turned streets to rivers, summer the tang of blackberries plucked from roadside brambles. Neighbors knew your business. Mrs. Callahan next door would watch James when I worked late, slipping him cookies with a wink. Church on Sundays was non-negotiable, not just for faith but for community. Reverend Ellis's sermons on perseverance spoke to me, a reminder that God's plan unfolded slowly, even through pain. I'd hold James's hand in the pew, his sneakers swinging, and pray for strength to be enough for him. Faith wasn't just belief, it was the scaffolding that held me upright when the world felt too heavy. By the time James was 10, his aptitude for science and math was undeniable. His fifth-grade teacher, Mr. Larson, pulled me aside one afternoon, his flannel shirt smelling faintly of chalk. "Eleanor, this kid's special. He's solving problems I'd give high schoolers." I nodded, pride swelling, but worry not at me. Pine Ridge's schools were good, but James needed more: science kits, coding classes, opportunities our budget couldn't stretch to. I started tutoring on weekends, trading sleep for extra cash to buy him a microscope, then a used laptop when he hit high school. "Mom, you work too hard," he'd say, catching me dozing over student essays. "Education opens doors," I'd reply, echoing my father. "This is for your future." That future felt tangible when James was accepted to Westmore University with a partial scholarship for computer engineering. I didn't hesitate to take equity from our home to cover the rest, despite colleagues' warnings about my own retirement. At 50, I should have been saving, but James was my investment. His graduation, the first in our family to earn a degree, was a triumph. "I'll pay back every penny, Mom," he promised, hugging me under the stadium lights, his cap askew. "When my startup goes public, you'll never worry about money again." I believed him, not for the money but for the man he was becoming: kind, driven, grateful. For years, he kept that promise. Bonuses from his Seattle tech job funded my first vacation in decades, a literary tour of England I'd dreamed of since college. He'd call weekly, his voice bright with updates about projects, promotions. Pine Ridge, with its cedar-scented air and familiar rhythms, remained my constant, but James was my horizon, proof that sacrifice could bloom into something beautiful. Then he met Andrea at a conference in Boston. Beautiful, ambitious, with an MBA and a smile that didn't reach her eyes, she changed everything. Their engagement was swift, their wedding a lavish affair at her parents' country club. I sold Richard's aviation books, my last emergency fund, to contribute, telling James, "Your father would have wanted this." He protested, but I insisted. I didn't see it then, the first crack in the foundation we'd built. Andrea's disapproval was subtle at first. Her visits to Pine Ridge were rare, her gaze sweeping my outdated kitchen with a polite, "How quaint." James's calls dwindled, his visits shortened by her family's events. When their startup was acquired, making them wealthy overnight, I expected joy. Instead, distance grew. James mentioned a lake house, a dream retreat with a guest cottage perfect for my retirement. Hope flickered, a new chapter near my son. But Andrea's call about his 40th birthday snuffed it out. "It's not the right fit, Eleanor," she said, her tone final. The rejection stung, but what she didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was the secret I'd carried for years, a financial tie to James that could unravel everything she'd so carefully curated. The rain came down in sheets that November morning, hammering the roof of my Pine Ridge bungalow like a warning. I stood at the kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hands, staring at the cedar trees bending under the storm's weight. Their branches swayed, resilient yet burdened, much like I felt after Andrea's call uninviting me from James's 40th birthday. Her words echoed in my mind, polished and precise: "The guest list is curated, Eleanor. You'd feel out of place." Out of place in my son's life, after 38 years of being his everything. The sting was sharp, but beneath it stirred something heavier, a secret I'd buried in a red folder, locked away in my filing cabinet. Alone, a promise, a piece of our past that could shift the ground beneath their perfect lake house. Pine Ridge woke slowly under the deluge. The town's pulse was steady, familiar, logging trucks growled past, their headlights cutting through the mist, while gulls wheeled over the sound, their cries sharp against the rain's rhythm. My home, modest but warm, smelled of old wood and the lavender sachets I tucked into drawers. The oak kitchen table, where James had built model rockets and written college essays, bore scars from our shared life, ink stains, a burn mark from a forgotten candle. It was here, a year ago, that James had spread out retirement brochures, his eyes alight with plans. "Mom, you've sacrificed everything," he'd said. "Let me give back. A condo in Arizona, maybe? Somewhere warm." His sincerity had rekindled hope, a vision of rest after decades of scraping by. Now, that hope felt like a mirage, dissolving under Andrea's calculated dismissal. I was 62, my knees aching from years of standing in classrooms, my eyes straining over countless student papers. Teaching at Lakeside Elementary had been my anchor since Richard's death, but the energy I'd once poured into lesson plans now drained faster each day. Retirement loomed, not as freedom but as a financial tightrope. My pension would cover necessities, barely. The equity I'd taken from the house for James's education left little cushion. Yet, James's success, his tech startup acquired, his wealth evident in the lake house photos Andrea posted online, had made me believe in a softer landing. His promise of a supplemental retirement fund, discussed over tea at this very table, had felt like a lifeline. But months passed, and the fund never materialized. Calls went unanswered, visits cancelled. Andrea's influence, subtle at first, had become a wall between us. That morning, I unlocked the filing cabinet, my fingers trembling as I pulled out the red folder. Inside were loan documents from 8 years ago, when James graduated from Westmore University and landed his first job in Seattle. He'd needed $30,000 to relocate, secure an apartment, buy suits for his tech role. His salary wouldn't start for 6 weeks, and he had no savings. I'd taken a home equity line of credit, risking my house, the only asset I had left, to give him a start. We'd signed a formal agreement, his signature bold next to mine, promising repayment with interest once his career stabilized. He'd paid diligently for a year, then his startup faltered. "Focus on your apartment, your emergency fund," I'd told him, pausing the repayments. That was 7 years ago. His company rebounded, his wealth skyrocketed, but the loan, $24,750 outstanding, remained untouched, a silent debt I'd never pressed. I spread the papers across the table, the legalese stark against the oak's grain. The acceleration clause caught my eye, full repayment due upon significant improvement in the borrower's financial circumstances. James's corporate acquisition, the lake house, the luxury SUV he now drove, all screamed wealth. Yet he'd never mentioned the loan, not even when promising to fund my retirement. Had he forgotten? Or had Andrea's world, with its glittering priorities, erased the sacrifices that built his success? The thought made my chest tighten, not just with hurt but with a flicker of resolve. I'd given everything, my youth, my savings, my dreams, to ensure James's future. I deserved more than exclusion from his life. The phone rang, jarring me. James's name flashed on the screen, a rare solo call without Andrea's shadow. "Mom, can we meet?" he asked, his voice strained. "Just us. Tomorrow, Green Lake Park, 10 a.m. by the playground." Green Lake, our sanctuary through his childhood, where we'd walked and dreamed. The rocket-shaped climber had been his favorite, a symbol of his space-obsessed years. "Of course," I said, my heart racing. "Is everything okay?" A pause, heavy with unspoken weight. "Not really. I'll explain tomorrow. I just needed to hear you." His vulnerability, so like the boy who'd clung to me after nightmares, softened my anger. But as we hung up, I sensed a storm brewing, bigger than the one outside. I drove to Harriet Winters's law office that afternoon, the red folder tucked under my arm. Harriet, my college roommate turned financial lawyer, had always been my rock, direct, fierce, her auburn hair now silver but her eyes still sharp. Her office, in a converted Victorian overlooking Pine Ridge's Main Street, smelled of leather and coffee. "Eleanor, this isn't like you," she said, embracing me, her gaze landing on the folder. "What's going on?" Over the next hour, I poured out the story, Richard's death, my sacrifices, James's rise, Andrea's growing control, the uninvitation, the loan. Harriet's pen moved swiftly across her notepad, her expression darkening when I mentioned a recent discovery, a credit check by Peninsula Trust, the bank James used, conducted without my consent 3 months ago, coinciding with their lake house purchase. "You never authorized this?" she asked, leaning forward. "Never," I said. "James mentioned Peninsula Trust for my retirement fund, but that was it. Nothing was set up." Harriet's eyes narrowed. "Unauthorized credit checks require personal information, social security number, date of birth. This could be financial exploitation." My stomach churned. James had my details, listed as my emergency contact. Could he have? I pushed the thought away, but Harriet pressed on. "This loan," she said, reviewing the documents, "is airtight. The acceleration clause means it's due now, given his wealth." "But Eleanor, what do you want? Restitution? Or something else?" I hesitated, the weight of her question grounding me. "I want accountability," I said finally. "Recognition of what I've given. Security for my future. And my son back, if that's possible." Harriet nodded, her voice gentle but firm. "We'll start with a formal demand letter for the loan. It shows you're serious without escalating to court. And I'll investigate this credit check. Something's not right." She handed me a dragonfly brooch, its delicate wings hiding a recorder. "Wear this at the park tomorrow. Washington's two-party consent law means it's legal if visible. Just in case." That night, I couldn't sleep. Pine Ridge's rain had softened to a drizzle, but my mind churned. The town's familiarity, its salt-tinged air, the distant hum of fishing boats, felt both comforting and claustrophobic. I opened a photo album, tracing James's growth, gap-toothed kindergarten grins, science fair trophies, college graduation. Where had my boy gone? Had Andrea's world changed him, or had I missed signs of drift? Faith had always guided me, but now I prayed for clarity, not just strength. "Lord, show me the path," I whispered, the words grounding me as they had through every loss. By morning, the sky cleared, sunlight glinting off wet pavement. I dressed in a warm sweater, pinned the brooch to my collar, and drove to Green Lake Park. The lake sparkled, framed by autumn's golds and reds, its path lined with joggers and dog walkers. I sat on a bench near the rocket climber, memories flooding back, James at 6, scaling it like an astronaut, shouting, "Mom, I'm going to Mars." Now, at 40, he approached, his steps heavy, his faded college sweatshirt a stark contrast to the corporate polish I'd seen lately. His eyes, shadowed with exhaustion, met mine, and for a moment, he was just my son again. "Mom," he said, sitting beside me, his voice breaking. "I haven't been honest. About the lake house, about everything." I braced myself, the brooch's weight a reminder of Harriet's caution. Whatever truth he was about to share, I knew it would change us. But as the lake reflected the morning light, I felt a flicker of hope. Sometimes, the deepest wounds lead to the truest healing, if you're brave enough to face them. The air at Green Lake Park carried the crisp bite of November, mingling with the earthy scent of wet leaves and the faint tang of the lake's brackish water. James sat beside me on the bench, his hands clasped tightly, knuckles pale against the faded maroon of his Westmore University sweatshirt. The rocket-shaped climber loomed nearby, its chipped paint a relic of his childhood dreams. I could still see him at 8, scrambling to the top, declaring he'd build spaceships one day. Now, at 40, he looked diminished, the weight of something unspoken pressing down on him. "Mom," he repeated, his voice low, "the lake house, it's not what I told you. There's more." My heart thudded, the dragonfly brooch on my collar feeling heavier, its hidden recorder capturing every word. I nodded, keeping my expression steady, though dread coiled in my chest. Pine Ridge's rhythms pulsed faintly in the distance, church bells tolling 10, the hum of a delivery truck on the main road. This park, our sanctuary, had always been where we unraveled life's knots. Sunday walks here had carried us through Richard's death, James's teenage anxieties, my endless juggling of work and motherhood. The lake's surface rippled under a breeze, reflecting fractured sunlight, much like the fractured truth I sensed James was about to reveal. I thought of Harriet's warning, truth costs more than we expect. Whatever James confessed, I braced for a shift, a reordering of the bond we'd built over decades. He stared at the water, avoiding my eyes. About a year ago, Andrea's father, Carlton, mentioned an estate he was handling. A Richard Jenkins, from England, with property here in Washington. He asked if he could be related to Dad. My breath caught. Richard Jenkins, a name tied to my late husband's distant family, one I'd never met. And was he? I asked, my voice calm despite the storm inside. James nodded, rubbing his forehead. A second cousin, apparently. Carlton said it was just a coincidence that the estate included a lakefront property. He didn't mention anything about inheritance, only that it was going into probate with dozens of heirs. I leaned forward, the bench's cold wood grounding me. But there was more to it, wasn't there? His eyes flicked to mine, startled, then dropped. Yeah. Carlton offered us a chance to buy the property at a discount, through his company, Thorndike International. Andrea was thrilled, said it was our dream home. He arranged financing through Peninsula Trust, where he's on the board. It seemed perfect. The hesitation in his voice told me it wasn't. I thought of the credit check Harriet had uncovered, run by Peninsula Trust without my consent, timed with their lake house purchase. James, I said carefully, did Carlton or Andrea ever ask about my finances? My home equity line, maybe? His face paled, and he looked away, the shame in his posture unmistakable. That's what I need to apologize for most, he whispered. When we needed extra funding for the lake house, beyond the mortgage, Andrea suggested, using your home equity line. Since I'm authorized on your accounts for emergencies, she said it'd be a family arrangement. They even ran a credit check to see if it was feasible. My stomach twisted, betrayal cutting deeper than I'd expected. My son, my James, had considered exploiting the very resource I'd stretched to give him a start. You didn't stop them? I asked, my voice steady but sharp. I didn't agree, he said quickly, finally meeting my gaze, his eyes pleading. But I didn't say no right away either. That was wrong. When I realized they'd actually checked your credit without telling you, I shut it down. Carlton found other financing through his connections. He swallowed hard. I'm so sorry, Mom. I let their world pull me in, and I lost sight of what's right. The apology was raw, but it didn't erase the sting. I thought of the red folder, the $24,750 loan he'd never repaid, the retirement fund he'd promised but never delivered. Promises broken, trust frayed. I took a slow breath, the lake's chill seeping into my bones. James, there's something else. I got an email from Carlton this morning. His head snapped up, shock widening his eyes. What? He contacted you? I nodded, recounting the message, Carlton's admission that James was a potential heir to Richard Jenkins's estate, that the lake house purchase was structured to bypass probate, and his claim that my finances were never used, despite preliminary inquiries. Most strikingly, he'd arranged repayment of the loan I'd mentioned at our 10th birthday lunch the previous day, plus interest, and offered a last-minute invitation to James's 40th. James's expression darkened with each detail. He knew I was an heir, he said, his voice hardening. Not just one of dozens, but the primary heir, through Dad's direct line. I found out yesterday, after you brought up the loan at lunch. Andrea was furious I hadn't told her about it. She called Carlton, and he took over, like always. But I started digging. I called an attorney, someone outside their influence. He thinks Carlton's actions could be executor fraud. The words hung between us, heavy as the storm clouds gathering over the lake. Fraud. A crime, not just a betrayal. My son, caught in a web spun by his wife and her father, was waking to the cost of their ambition. I studied him, seeing both the boy I'd raised and the man he'd become, successful, yet diminished by choices he hadn't fully questioned. Why didn't you tell me about the estate? I asked softly. Why keep it from me? He rubbed his hands together, as if trying to warm them. At first, I didn't think it mattered, just a distant cousin, a business deal. Andrea and Carlton handled everything so fast. I trusted them. Then, when I realized the property tied to Dad's family, I wanted it to be special, a legacy. But they saw it as an asset, nothing more. His voice cracked. I didn't want to disappoint you, Mom. You've always believed in me, and I've been failing you. The admission broke something in me, not anger, but a deep ache for the boy who'd once promised to pay back every penny. You haven't failed me, I said, my voice gentler now. But you've lost yourself, James. I see it in you, the way you defer to Andrea, the way you let Carlton's world swallow yours. He nodded, tears brimming. I know. I've been compromising, bit by bit, until I don't recognize myself. The lake house, the birthday plans, it's all about their priorities, not mine. He paused, then added, the guest cottage, Mom. I wanted you there, close to us. It felt right, like honoring Dad. But Andrea and Carlton said it was for important guests. I should have fought harder. The cottage. The perfect retirement home Andrea had dismissed as too valuable for me. The rejection stung anew, but James's regret was real, a crack in the facade he'd worn too long. I thought of Pine Ridge, its cedar forests and salt-soaked air, the community that had held me through loss. Faith had taught me resilience, but it was love, fierce, unwavering love for my son, that kept me here, listening, even as betrayal cut deep. What do you want, James? I asked, echoing the question I'd posed to myself in Harriet's office. Not what they want. What do you need to be whole again? He looked at the lake, where children laughed on the playground, their voices carrying over the water. I want to be me again, he said finally. The person you raised, honest, principled. I want you in my life, not pushed aside. And I want to fix this, starting with the loan. I'll repay it, Mom, not through Carlton's cleanup. Me. His conviction stirred pride, but caution lingered. Words were easy, actions harder. Still, I saw a spark of the James the First knew, the one who'd built rockets and dreamed big, before ambition and influence dulled his edges. As we stood to leave, the lake reflecting a sky now bruised with clouds, my phone chimed. An email from Harriet, preliminary findings on Lakeside Legacy Holdings. Urgent. Can you come by this afternoon? My pulse quickened. The LLC tied to the lake house financing, another piece of the puzzle. I glanced at James, his expression resolute yet fragile. I have to see someone later, I said. But we'll talk again soon. I'm here, James. Always. He hugged me, the embrace lingering, and for a moment, Pine Ridge's familiar heartbeat, the gulls, the wind, the distant bells, felt like a promise. The truth was unraveling, and with it, a chance to rebuild what we'd nearly lost. The drive from Green Lake Park to Harriet Winters's law office felt like crossing a threshold, Pine Ridge's familiar streets blurring into a haze of cedar and salt air. The rain had returned, a soft drizzle painting the windshield, mirroring the uncertainty clouding my thoughts. James's confession, his complicity in considering my home equity for their lake house, his discovery of Carlton Thorndyke's fraud, had cracked open a truth I wasn't fully prepared to face. My son, the boy I'd raised on sacrifice and faith, had been ensnared by a world I barely understood. Harriet's email, with its promise of new findings about Lakeside Legacy Holdings, pulsed in my mind like a warning. Whatever lay ahead, I knew the red folder in my passenger seat, holding the unpaid loan documents, was no longer just a relic of our past. It was leverage, a tether to accountability I hadn't wanted to pull. Harriet's office, tucked above Pine Ridge's Main Street, smelled of polished wood and fresh coffee, a stark contrast to the storm brewing outside. She rose from her desk, her silver hair catching the lamplight, and embraced me with a warmth that steadied my nerves. You look shaken, Eleanor, she said, gesturing to a chair by the window. The park meeting was heavy, I take it? I nodded, setting the dragonfly brooch on her desk, its recorder now a silent witness to James's raw honesty. He admitted they considered using my home equity, I said, my voice tight. And he's learned Carlton hid his inheritance rights to the lake house. He's talking about fraud, Harriet. Legal action. Her eyes sharpened, and she reached for a folder thick with documents. That aligns with what I've found. Sit. This is bigger than we thought. The room felt smaller as Harriet spread out papers, her voice measured but urgent. Lakeside Legacy Holdings, the LLC tied to the Lake House financing, was created 2 weeks before James and Andrea's purchase. It's registered through a service that obscures ownership, but my contact at the county records dug deeper. She slid a property deed across the table, a name highlighted, Richard A. Jenkins Estate. My late husband's name, though not his distant cousin, the English developer whose lake house had sparked this mess. The property was listed at $1.75 million 6 months ago, Harriet continued. James and Andrea bought it for $1.2 million, a steal in this market. Too convenient. I frowned, my mind racing. James said Carlton offered it as a family accommodation. But he didn't know he was the primary heir. Harriet's expression hardened. Exactly. And here's the kicker, the estate's executor is Thorndike International Holdings, Carlton's company. Andrea's father. They knew James had a direct claim through Richard's lineage, potentially the entire property, plus other assets. Instead, they structured a purchase, profiting while bypassing his rights. My breath caught. This wasn't just opportunism, it was deliberate deception, orchestrated by the man who'd casually repaid my loan to silence questions. Harriet pointed to another document, an email chain from Thorndike International's internal servers, obtained through a discreet contact. These show Carlton and Andrea discussing the estate a year ago. They identified James as the heir early but chose not to notify him. Andrea suggested the purchase to secure the asset before probate complications. The words blurred on the page, betrayal cutting deeper with each line. Andrea, who'd smiled at my son's wedding, who'd judged my modest home, had knowingly manipulated him. And James, caught in her orbit, had nearly lost himself to their ambition. Could James have known? I asked, the question painful but necessary. Harriet considered, her pen tapping the desk. Unlikely, based on what you've described. Carlton's company controlled the information. James trusted Andrea and her father to handle the details. But Eleanor, the credit check on your accounts, it suggests they were exploring every angle to fund this deal, even unethical ones. She leaned forward, her voice softening. What did James say he wants now? I recounted his resolve, to reclaim his integrity, to repay the loan himself, to confront Carlton's fraud. He's meeting an attorney tomorrow, I said. Someone independent. He's done being their pawn. Harriet nodded, approval in her eyes. Good. He's waking up. But we need to protect you, too. The loan, $24,750, is legally due, and Carlton's repayment doesn't absolve James's responsibility. I've drafted a demand letter, formal but not aggressive. It establishes your claim without burning bridges. She slid the letter across, its language stark, notice of demand for repayment, pursuant to the loan agreement dated. And the credit check? I asked. I'm pushing the bank for answers, she replied. If James or Andrea accessed your information without consent, it's identity fraud. We'll know more soon. I clutched the red folder, its weight a reminder of the line I was crossing. Harriet, I don't want to destroy James. I just want fairness. Security. To know he values what I gave him. She reached for my hand, her grip firm. This isn't about destruction. It's about boundaries. You've carried this family alone for decades. James needs to see the cost of his choices, not just for you but for himself. Her words echoed the sermons I'd heard at Pine Ridge's church, Reverend Ellis's voice urging perseverance through truth. Faith had sustained me, but now it demanded action, a stand for the life I'd built. As I left, Harriet handed me the brooch. Keep this for now. If James wants another private talk, wear it. And Eleanor, trust your instincts. You've always known what's right for your son. The drizzle had thickened to rain, Pine Ridge's streets slick under streetlights. I drove home, the town's heartbeat, gulls crying, waves lapping the sound, grounding me. My bungalow welcomed me with its familiar creaks, the oak table waiting like a confidant. I opened the photo album again, lingering on James at 15, his science fair volcano erupting to cheers. That boy still existed, I told myself, beneath the corporate sheen Andrea had polished onto him. The next morning, my phone chimed with a text from James. "Mom, attorney meeting went well. Evidence is strong. Filing complaints against Carlton with State Bar today. Can we talk after?" My heart lifted, pride mingling with caution. He was fighting, reclaiming his voice. I replied, "Of course. I'm here." But as I set the phone down, another email arrived, this one from an unfamiliar address, carlton@tieholdings.com. The subject, regarding James Jenkins and lakeside property. My finger hovered, pulse quickening. Should I read it before seeing James? Harriet's advice echoed, knowledge is power. I opened it. "Mrs. Jenkins," it began, formal and cold. "This concerns the property at 1742 Lakeview Retreat, purchased by your son James Jenkins and my daughter Andrea Thorndike Jenkins. It has come to my attention through Andrea that you have raised questions about the financing and a personal loan you provided James." The email confirmed James's heirship, dismissed the credit check as a misstep, and noted the loan repayment already processed. Most jarring was the final line, "Andrea has reconsidered the guest list and extends an invitation to James's birthday celebration." A formal invite would follow, it said, as if a last-minute gesture could erase the exclusion. I sat back, the words sinking in. Carlton's email wasn't an olive branch, it was damage control, a calculated move to neutralize my questions. The birthday invitation felt like a bribe, not remorse. I thought of Pine Ridge's church, where I'd learned forgiveness but also discernment. This wasn't reconciliation, it was manipulation, and James was caught in its web. I forwarded the email to Harriet, adding, "He's trying to silence me." "What now?" Her reply came swiftly, "Bring this to James today. He needs to see Carlton's tactics. Stay strong." As I prepared to meet James, the rain eased, sunlight breaking through Pine Ridge's gray. The town felt alive, children splashing in puddles, the cannery's whistle signaling a shift change. My faith, rooted in this community, reminded me that truth, though painful, was the path to healing. James was fighting for his integrity, I would fight for mine. The lake house, once a symbol of exclusion, was becoming something else, a battleground for the values I'd instilled in my son, and the legacy we'd reclaimed together. The sun hung low over Pine Ridge, casting golden streaks across the Puget Sound as I drove to meet James at my bungalow after his attorney meeting. The air smelled of cedar and sea salt, the town's heartbeat steady in the hum of fishing boats and the distant clang of the cannery. Carlton's email, with its calculated concessions and belated birthday invitation, sat like a stone in my stomach. It wasn't an apology but a maneuver, and I knew James needed to see it. The red folder, now a symbol of accountability, rested on the passenger seat beside Harriet's dragonfly brooch, its recorder dormant but ready. My son was fighting to reclaim himself, I had to stand firm, not just for my security but for the values I'd poured into him, honesty, integrity, love that endured through pain. Inside, the bungalow welcomed me with its familiar warmth, worn oak floors, the faint lavender of drawer sachets, the photograph of 5-year-old James on the mantel, his birthday candles glowing. I set the table with tea and the banana bread I'd baked that morning, a ritual from his childhood. When James arrived, his knock was hesitant, his appearance more like the boy I'd raised than the corporate figure he'd become. His jeans were faded, his Westmore sweatshirt creased, and his eyes carried a mix of determination and exhaustion. "Mom," he said, stepping inside, his embrace lingering. Today was a lot. We sat at the oak table, its scars a map of our shared history, rocket projects, college applications, dreams shaped over decades. "Tell me," I said, pouring tea, the steam curling between us. He took a deep breath, hands wrapping around the mug. The attorney reviewed everything, Carlton's emails, the estate records, the LLC. It's clear Thorndike International deliberately hid my heirship. I filed complaints with the state bar and the attorney general today. They're launching a full investigation. His voice was steady, but his fingers trembled slightly. If the evidence holds, Carlton could face disbarment, maybe criminal charges. Andrea knew, Mom. She was part of it from the start. The words landed heavily, confirming what Harriet's documents had suggested. Andrea, with her polished smiles and dismissive glances, had betrayed not just me but James, her husband. How are you holding up? I asked, my voice soft but searching. He looked at the table, tracing a burn mark with his thumb. I feel like I'm waking from a bad dream. I trusted her, let her family's world become mine. The lake house, the birthday plans, it was all about their agenda. I'm done being their pawn. His resolve stirred pride, but his pain was palpable, a reminder of the boy who'd once cried over a broken model rocket, trusting me to fix it. I slid my phone across the table, Carlton's email open. You need to see this. His brow furrowed as he read, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. He's trying to buy your silence, he said, voice low. The loan repayment, the birthday invite, it's all damage control. And this? He pointed to the line about preliminary inquiries into my finances. That's him admitting they accessed your credit without permission, then brushing it off. He pushed the phone back, jaw tight. This is why I'm fighting, Mom. They don't get to rewrite the truth. I nodded, the weight of his conviction grounding me. Harriet's investigating the credit check. She says it could be identity fraud. And the loan, her demand letter is ready, but I haven't sent it. I wanted to talk to you first. His eyes met mine, raw with regret. Send it. I owe you that money, not Carlton's cleanup crew. I promised to repay you, and I meant it. I just lost sight of it in their world. The sincerity in his voice echoed the James I'd raised, the one who'd vowed to make me proud. But trust, once fractured, needed time to mend. I'll talk to Harriet, I said. We'll make it right, together. The conversation shifted to the lake house, the property that had unraveled everything. What happens if you win? I asked. If it's legally yours? He leaned back, exhaling. I don't know yet. It's not about the money, it's about Dad's legacy, our family. That property was his cousin's, part of who we are. Carlton and Andrea turned it into a status symbol, but it could be something more. His words sparked a vision, a place of purpose, not exclusion. I thought of Pine Ridge's community, the church where Reverend Ellis preached redemption through service. Faith had carried me through loss, perhaps it could guide us now. As we spoke, the bungalow's walls seemed to hold us, its creaks and shadows a testament to the life we'd built. James reached for a piece of banana bread, a faint smile breaking through. This tastes like home, he said, and for a moment, we were just mother and son, untangled from the Thorndike web. But the moment was fleeting. My phone chimed, another email from Harriet, urgent. Thorndike International emails confirm Andrea's active role in suppressing airship. Meet tomorrow? I showed James, his face hardening. She's not the person I married, he said quietly. I've asked for counseling, but I'm not sure it's enough. The admission hung between us, heavy as the rain now drumming the roof. Pine Ridge's evening settled in, streetlights flickering through the drizzle, the sounds waves a distant murmur. I thought of my youth, the trauma of losing my parents, the poverty that had shaped my resilience. I'd survived by leaning on faith and community, Mrs. Callahan's cookies, Reverend Ellis's sermons, Patricia Winters's job offer. Now, James needed that same anchor. You don't have to decide everything now, I said, touching his hand. But you're not alone. We'll face this together. He nodded, tears brimming. I don't deserve you, Mom. After everything, letting Andrea uninvite you, the loan, the lake house mess. I squeezed his hand, my voice firm. You're my son. Love doesn't keep score. But it does demand truth. Keep fighting for that, and we'll find our way. He hugged me, the embrace fierce, and I felt the boy who'd climbed rockets, the man who'd lost his way, and the sun now clawing back to himself. As he left, promising to call tomorrow, Pine Ridge's night wrapped around us, gulls silent, stars hidden, but the promise of dawn lingering. The next morning, I met Harriet, her office a haven of clarity amid the storm. She laid out the new emails, Andrea's directives to secure the asset before James could claim it, her approval of the credit check as a backup plan. "This is damning," Harriet said. "James's complaints have traction. Carlton's facing civil suits, maybe worse. Andrea's complicity could cost her professionally." I swallowed, the scope overwhelming. "What about James?" She softened. "He's doing the right thing. Support him, but protect yourself. Send the demand letter. And Eleanor, start thinking about what you want, not just for him, but for you." Driving home, Pine Ridge's cedars stood tall, their resilience a mirror to my own. The lake house, once a symbol of betrayal, was shifting, a legacy we could redefine. Faith, community, love, these had carried me through loss, they would carry us through healing. As I parked, my phone lit up with a text from James, "Counseling session today. I'm telling Andrea I want a separation. I need to be me again. Thank you, Mom." Pride surged, tempered by sorrow. The road ahead was long, but we were walking it together, toward a truth that, however painful, promised redemption.